but the actual substance of feeling that caffeine high, it was like my hand was like kind of shaky, and my thoughts were like a little erratic and almost like too focused. Like I didn't have this kind of like lantern, like it was like a spotlight, on thoughts. And it wasn't this like lantern consciousness. And so I started just to be like, well, maybe caffeine is a big one for me. Like it just doesn't translate to my lifestyle. And so that was a big shift for me in discovering, what I put in my body can actually be one of the main culprits of causing anxiety.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's the Bearded Man podcast with your favorite, the world's favorite bearded man, Bobbbaaaay. Each week with our guest episodes, I try to put the spotlight on an expert who can help us reach our inner potential. He's the founder and CEO of MUD WTR, a coffee alternative made with organic ingredients, celebrated by cultures young and old for their health and performance benefits. With 1/7 of caffeine as a cup of coffee, you get focus, energy, and immunity without the jitters, crash, and dependency. And they also now have an evening product which can help you ease into your night and will help you prepare yourself for the day ahead after that. Today on the podcast, Shane Heath.
Well said, my man. Well said.
How we feeling?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Really excited to have you on the podcast today. Although you are building a massive business, there's a couple things that I've researched and I see so clear about you. Somebody that's big on focus, big on energy, big on morning routines, night, evening routines. I think you've had a lot of stillness in your life in the sense of like you've had a lot of time to do a lot of inner work, which I think ripples into the company you've built, the people that seem to be working for you. And so there's a lot of topics we're going to dive into today, but I appreciate you taking time, and I think this is going to be a really good conversation.
Thanks, man. I'm excited.
Yeah, let's get it. Let's
do it.
So this show's all about reaching our inner potential, right? Talk to me about how your morning rituals help you build momentum for your day, which I think just helps you maximize the day ahead of you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think about that concept a lot. In fact, I'd say it's probably part of my life purpose is helping others find their potential, find their path, find their why, and find their passion. And for me, it's been a huge part of my life for sure. And as a business owner too, like I think the job of a CEO is to find a company's potential. Like it's all about like seeing what's there and trying to maximize that is kind of where I'm at in my life. When it comes to morning ritual, morning routine, I like to say the best morning ritual starts the night before.
So true.
And this is something that is sort of new for me, right? Like I don't think sleep has been a big part of a lot of people's lives or awareness and up until like recently. I mean, at least for me or somebody like working in tech, sleep is sort of positioned for the
pandemic. I feel like, not to cut you off, but I think the pandemic made people more aware of like, now that they're working in the same room that they sleep in, they can get more sleep. And I think they've been feeling it.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that combined with like Oura rings or Whoop bands and different podcasts and people out there talking about it, Matthew Walker, books and whatnot. And yeah, so I really try to think about sleep. Maybe right now it's almost like too stressful. I'll look at my Oura ring. I'm like, I got shitty sleep last night. And it like ruins my day. So I'm trying to find a good balance there of like quantifying and measuring without allowing that to seep into just letting things be. But yeah, once I wake up, I have a pretty replicable morning routine. I have a girlfriend and we read a page out of A Course of Miracles, which is a pretty interesting book. It's one of those books that there's sort of like a page for every day. So there's 365 lessons and you just kind of read through, and it's very contemplative. And so we'll read, it's only like a couple pages, and then meditate for 10 minutes. And that's kind of like right while we're sitting in bed, sort of priming the mind. But I think for me, I also try to use some of that time to ground down into being here in this world, which is maybe sounds a little strange, but I like often, or for the most of my life, I would just wake up and jump right into things. Like it might be my phone, but it might be like just running to the gym or doing something. And I've found that if I spend a couple minutes just realizing that I'm in my body, like here on this rock hurling through space, it's just a really good grounding exercise to put things in perspective that might arise as the day starts to progress. And that's sort of a theme through my morning is priming my mind to handle potential stress or opportunities, or maybe creative ideas. I'm trying to create like a fertile soil for that mental landscape. And so I'll typically do some sort of movement, which, there's tons of benefits there. But I think for me, something difficult, like a CrossFit class or like a hot yoga class, something where it's like pushing myself, really does help me handle the stress that might come later in the day. It sort of sets that stress spectrum where it's like, maybe an email is no longer on the high end of stress because I actually did something really difficult to start the day.
Yeah.
And then I have a sauna and a cold plunge here. And so I'll do some breath.
Freaking dialed, man. You got
it's
it
so good.
in.
I mean, I'm in love with hot, cold, and then doing some breath work in there is just like the best. It's the best thing for me. It's truly my medicine. I actually got a new sauna, and so I was without one for like 2 weeks, and I was like losing my shit. Like, I don't know, maybe this is bad. I'm addicted to this, but it is so good for both when you are feeling good and you're just looking to prime yourself for the day, but also when you're in like a little bit of a funk, like jumping in that cold water and doing some breathing. Setting aside some time to doing like a Wim Hof exercise. There's so many out there. You can use like the Open app. I found repeatedly can literally turn me 180 degrees from being like in this kind of depressed, lost state to like, okay, I remember why I'm here. I'm ready. Let's go. And completely change my energy level. So those are the main staples in my morning. And I'll typically journal a little bit before I jump into Slack and email once the day starts.
That's when the fires start coming up and it starts to tame some things down.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer of the philosophy of you win the morning, you win the day. And to me, it's not about what time you wake up. It's just about how do you prioritize those first couple hours of your morning to make sure that you're feeling your best self. Because especially you as a CEO and founder, you're a leader, right? And so it makes sense. You prioritize yourself. You cross off these things that make you feel your best self, to get your mind sharp, your body sharp, so that by the time you're actually tackling your work, you're prepared for it. Whereas you roll out of bed, you start scrolling on social media, you answer emails, you're answering phone calls. I don't know. You have to be a super human to just be able to just like attack that and still keep your mind straight throughout the day. But I've found that taking that time every single morning to really slow down, warm myself up for the day so that by the time I'm answering emails, texts, social media, I've been up for 3 hours. I've already had my me time, which then allows me to like feel like I'm ready to go. What do you feel like, was there a moment in your life that kind of inspired you down this path of like, I want to say like just human potential and realizing like the benefit of meditation, the benefit of cold plunges and saunas? Like, I feel like a lot of people, there's like either a split moment or there's a situation in their life where they kind of redirect their path into making sure that they're, doing these habits that make them feel their best. Was there a moment for you?
There's moments for sure. There's sort of like maybe a string of events over the course of decade or so. I would say introspection really started when I was like 14 going into high school. I had my first like psychedelic experience, I guess you could say, where my friends and I were starting to smoke weed at the time. We thought we were cool. We were making little like mini pipes and whatnot, but I don't think we were really getting high, but we thought we were. Yeah. And then 420 comes around and we're like thinking we're really cool 14-year-olds. And I'm always like a builder. So I built this 14-foot tall bong. I'm not kidding. And I got like, I had to get on the roof, and then I'm like a child, dude, but had no idea what I was doing. And we smoked, and then it was just like chaos ensued after. Like his sister came in and was freaking out on us, calling the parents, kicking us out of the house. And I'm like stoned out of my mind for the first time in my life with no tools to navigate sort of that level of a shift in consciousness. And it freaked me the fuck out. Like I was in a weird state for like weeks. It was, I needed to integrate it, but I didn't know like what that meant. I was like, I just don't want to tell my parents, but I'm freaking out. I can't tell them that I smoked weed because it's bad. And did I, fry my brain? All these like dare messages started coming back, So, I mean, that just like opened my mind up though to, a new way of thinking or just like new dimensions of reality almost, where I was like, in that moment, I was sort of like seeing things happening twice and just like everything was slowing down and time seemed to kind of, it didn't exist in like the solid state that I had previously relied upon it to exist. And, it took, years to really integrate that, but it led me to be very curious about consciousness. And I had a friend a best friend who died 2 years later, and that made me, combine with like consciousness and life itself. And I just had a lot of questions starting to rise up in me that I didn't really have a lot of thought partners to explore with. My parents are amazing and, were there for me, religious though. And that was kind of the answer, was like God or Jesus, or just praying and whatnot. But I felt a little ill-equipped to navigate some of these questions that I had. And then I got into college and, kind of went party mode, like just kind of try to forget about all of those questions. And then I had a roommate of mine commit suicide. And it was just like
in college.
Yeah. And it was like blindsided in the moment. I think in retrospect, like there was definitely signs, but we weren't putting ourselves in the state to being aware of what was going on around us. We were like beer pong Thursday through Sunday and going to school and surfing and girls, and that was it. There wasn't a lot of being aware about how I felt about life, or even considering the future, and considering how other people felt was far from my spectrum of existence. But that was a huge slap in the face for me, and sort of brought back that wave of questions that I had suppressed when I was, freshman in high school and sophomore. All of a sudden, just kind of was presented to me right in front of my face. And I was now at an age where I felt, I was away from home. I could unpattern and start to explore things if I wanted to. And that's kind of what I started doing. And luckily I had a couple of friends who weren't in my direct friend circle at the time, who were, exploring things like Ayurveda and yoga and meditation and whatnot. And so I started talking to them, and I did like this Ayurvedic cleanse, and it was pretty hilarious because I was living with the same people. I was at times doing the similar things that I was doing, but I was also doing some of these other things. And like our fridge would be full of like Keystone Light from all my roommates. And then there'd be like Shane's section that would have like barks and like different herbs and different things. And but that was a really impactful sort of lead domino in this personal discovery, where I started to feel more empowered to march to the beat of my own drum and find out what that drum beat actually sounded like. And that just kind of led me down a couple of years of personal exploration. And
it's beautiful, man. In the sense of those experience, having a roommate commit suicide is not beautiful, but in the sense of how you're able to kind of internalize and use that to then open your mind to exploring and trying to find some of these answers to these questions. And even the confidence of, when I was in college, I had those same, I'm in the same surroundings where it's like the fridge is always stocked with beer. The weekends are always partying. Like, to be able to even just start hedging yourself to like try to go on a different path is like, it takes a lot of confidence. So I respect that you had that ability to just like, I'm going to try this. I know not everyone else is doing this, but I'm at least kind of seek it. What were some of those big questions that you were trying to find the answer to?
Some of the questions, it's tough to put into the English language, right? But it's like those questions about existence itself, about why I'm here, like what is our purpose? Like, I'd be like in a group of friends, we're all playing some sort of drinking game and just kind of like, what are we, is this life? Like, what is going on here? And then starting to become more aware of people's struggle, and myself included. Early in high school when I was going through all that, like I was depressed, like I was anxious, and I didn't really have any friend circle, or I didn't have the tools to even really talk about it, what I was going through. And so I just started to become more aware of how many people out there were probably experiencing the same thing, or who are experiencing or who have experienced the same thing, but also had similarly like no real cultural constructs to navigate through it with. And so that became, a big question for me, is like, why is it like that? Like, why is this sort of these internal secrets, like when you're looking around at your friend group or walking through a group of people, like everyone looks fine, everyone's having a great time, but there's a lot more going on an individual by individual basis. And that became, really interesting to me. But I still, even when I became more aware of that, started to exploring some of that, there wasn't a lot of people around me to navigate through a lot of those questions with. And oddly enough, it was podcasts that really provided me an outlet, or it made me feel like there was a community that was supportive of those struggles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the beauty. I started listening to podcasts spring semester my senior year, because I was going through this epiphany of like, what is it? What is life? What are we doing here? Like, I went to a top business school thinking I was going to go corporate America, and I realized that was not what I wanted to do. And listening to podcasts allowed me to drop into these conversations with people that I would never be able to get into the room with, but being able to hear two like-minded individuals have an authentic conversation and feel like I was literally just sitting in on it, completely opened my mind to like what the realities are out there, right? When all you know is what's around you, you think that that's the way life is supposed to go and that's the path you're supposed to follow. But as soon as you start being able to tap into these other conversations, just listening, it's unbelievable how your mind just expands. That's why we both live in Venice, California, because not only is the sunshine great, but anywhere you go in this part of LA, like you can drop into these conversations.
Yeah.
At Air One, you could drop into them at a coffee shop. Like our reality is so much different than what ours was probably 5 years ago, because we're just around people that think that way. And so it's amazing how just the awareness of, if people out there exist, I could think that way. And it just completely changes your perspective and the way you feel about your own life and the direction that you could actually go. Yeah.
It's like that concept of you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Like you become, you can, there's good sides of that, but there's bad sides of that too, where you become sort of confined to how people expect you to act, how people expect you to talk, what people expect you to pursue in life. Like all of these things become these like cultural prescriptions that can be, given to you even on like a friend group level.
Yeah.
And you can't really explore certain things like, oh, I want to try meditating. Like what? Like, come on, you're lame or whatever, and you're like, oh shit, I can't do it. But when I was after school, I moved to San Francisco. I was working in Silicon Valley. So I had this commute from San Francisco to Mountain View. It was like 90 minutes either way, both ways. And I was like, this is the worst thing ever. Like I'm sitting in a car for this long. What a waste of time. What a waste of my life. But it was a good opportunity, and I just viewed it as like a stepping stone. But then someone was like, have you heard of a podcast? I'm like, no idea what that is. I really don't like audiobooks. They're boring. And somehow stumbled across Joe Rogan. Maybe you heard of him, right? But it was this was in 2014. So it was episode 127, like early on, right? Like he's in the thousands probably now. I don't know.
Yeah, he's like 1,700 now. Early. You're early.
So like episode 127, I turned this podcast thing on, and it was like you said, 2 people, Aubrey Marcus and him, were just talking, just chit chatting. And it was as though I was in that conversation with them. It just so happened that they were talking about Aubrey Marcus's first ayahuasca experience. And, and he was, talking about a lot of these existential questions and exploring them through this plant medicine that I'd never heard of. And I was like, what is plant medicine? Like what, Peru, like, whoa, Amazon, like all these traditions, and talking about mental health, all of these things. And I was just like, whoa, this is not what me and my friends talk about. Like, this is opening me up to a whole new thing that I'm obviously deeply interested in. It just like rung me like a gong or something. And so much so that I brought that podcast to a friend's house, and we were all like hanging out. I'm like, do you guys know what a podcast is? Listen to this. And it seriously like shifted this group of friends that I was hanging out with at the time, where one of them went off and started a podcast like 3 months later. Wow. And it's really good podcast, like crushing it to this day. And then another maybe 6 months later was on his way down to Peru for his first ayahuasca experience. And later, was down living in the jungle for 3 months. Wow. With the Yawanawa tribe. Like, it just completely changed our life trajectory just by opening up our friend circle to this other, way of talking, way of thinking, questions, and all of those things. So I'm super grateful for this format.
Man, I love that. I love that Joe. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Joe Rogan. He part of his childhood, he grew up in Massachusetts. That's where I'm from. So I'm like, listen, I'm the next Joe Rogan. Here we come. But I'm a big fan of like the platform he's built, which is, it's just open conversation. It's just pure curiosity. And his specific show has definitely impacted and had a ripple effect on me of just like, keep your mind open to these types of conversations, because I think it's unbelievable how it can really shift the perspective and the way you see your own world. And I know when you were working in Silicon Valley, I think there was part of your, there was a time there, and I think this is what ends up leading into kind of how eventually Mudwater got started. But I think you dealt with quite a bit of anxiety, and you had mentioned this just a moment ago. But what have you found to be like the tips or tricks back when you were kind of going through it to calm that anxiety down? Because if you can calm down the anxiety, you can focus on the day ahead. Your energy levels are going to be utilized to calming yourself down, and it just completely disrupts your mental health, your physical health. Looking back, were there certain things that you were doing to calm yourself down?
Yeah, so that was like 2014. I was living a really healthy life because I thought that was going to help me with anxiety, depression, these things. So eating a healthy diet, exercising daily. But I also was pursuing like an ambitious lifestyle as well with my job, trying to work my way up in the startup world, wanting to start my own company. And then also being a fine artist, where I was like, had this side hustle, fine art career going on. So super active, had a lot going on and wanted to do a lot. And I thought caffeine was like, it was like going to allow me to do more and do it faster. Essentially. I thought it was good for me. And looking around, it seemed like everyone was doing it, including amazingly healthy people. And so I was just like, cool, I'll take more of that. Let's go. I want to do more. And, I wasn't really conscious about sleep at the time, and my anxiety anxiety and depression, they both kind of like would like come in waves. And I was just like, I don't know what's causing this, like what's going on, but all of a sudden I'll feel completely out of whack. And, things like creativity and would just be tough to find at times. And luckily, I think oddly, because I paint, where I'm spending like hours in front of a canvas, like I was really in tune with how like certain things, food or drinks, would make me feel, and how it would actually translate to promoting more creativity or maybe inhibiting it. And caffeine was an odd one because it definitely like made me feel awake. And there was this ritual aspect where I'd drink it before going to work where I was creative, or I'd drink it before beginning a painting or whatever. But the actual substance of feeling that caffeine high, I was like, my hand was like kind of shaky, and my thoughts were like a little erratic and almost like too focused. Like I didn't have this kind of like lantern, like it was like a spotlight, on thoughts, and it wasn't just like lantern consciousness. And so I started just to be like, well, maybe caffeine is a big one for me. Like it just doesn't translate to my lifestyle. And so that was a big shift for me in discovering, what I put in my body can actually be one of the main culprits of causing anxiety. And then I started to notice impacts on sleep too. If I was underslept, like my mental state was just so tough to manage, and just a good night's sleep would just turn everything around.
I know.
And caffeine and caffeine for me, for sure, and sleep go hand in hand. If I'm drinking a lot of caffeine for a prolonged period of time, my sleep begins to suffer pretty quickly. And then the anxiety, depression kind of comes from all angles.
Yeah, I think it takes personal experience for people to understand both the caffeine and the importance of sleep. Where I used to pound caffeine when I was working in office because I felt like that was the fuel to keep going. And then I just realized like this is not sustainable and I feel like shit. And yeah, I have like this high level of energy, but like I don't even know where to put the focus because I'm just like, oh, I need to do this, but I also should work this and then I should do that. And it got sporadic. But then also the importance of like the sleep aspect, like you're saying, where, you know, it's not until you start to feel the restfulness that although you figure, oh, I can sacrifice, you know, an extra hour of sleep because I'll get an extra hour more work done. But you don't realize is that extra hour really impacts the next 24 hours. And had you given yourself that time to recover, you would be so much more clear-minded, so much more focused, so much more energized for that next day instead of, you know, sacrificing that 1 hour, which honestly just never really helps you. I know you also did what I thought was really interesting about your story was you spent 6 months in India doing it was like an art, I don't want to say an internship. Residency. Yeah. Before that trip though, you had never traveled outside the US. Talk to me about how that trip, as somebody especially who's has already been kind of open-minded to like, what are we doing here? What is life? What is my purpose? How does that trip change your mindset, your perspective, your why?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, had been grinding for like 5 years, Silicon Valley, started a company that failed, like going hard. and I was just like, I got invited to do this residency. I'm like, I'm going. I'd never been out of the US. I've been to Mexico, but never off the continent, and just found myself in Goa, like just crazy different, right? Like how you drive, what people are wearing, the music, the taste of the food, like everything was just completely altered from here. And I think that was just like a big perspective shift where we kind of get lulled into thinking that this is the way it's always been and this is the way it is everywhere, whether that's how we work or what we believe. Like we kind of look around ourselves and all of our beliefs are sort of perpetuated by everybody just kind of following in line. And traveling in general can be a great perspective shift, like almost similar to psychedelics, where it allows you to sort of unpattern, like unlearn and sort of relearn with this broader perspective of how like maybe there's a better way, like you're able to see different possibilities there. And so that's definitely what it brought to me. I, you know, no longer at that time I was quitting caffeine. And so going there was an amazing shift to kind of be pulled out of that culture that was holding me in that, where, you know, it was at the office. It was, you know, the common meeting, like, let's go grab a cup of coffee, made it really tough to quit. But all of a sudden in India, you know, there isn't like at least where I was, like the Starbucks on every corner. And then, just started to take a fresh look at everything from what I was pursuing in life, like really grounding down into like, I want to be doing something creative. I want to be doing something that's really aligned with my passions, my values, my purpose. And, you know, took that, came home and sort of doubled down and went deep on all of those realizations. And the fire that it lit in me to find better ways to do things, whether it's what I was drinking in the morning or how I worked or building a company and trying to think about how we can serve our employees in a different way than maybe what people think is possible. It opened up to, it removed limitations on what was possible, I think.
Yeah, you're doing let me just say this, and I'm speaking from, I'm an employee at Liquid I.V, and they've built an incredible culture, and I feel very fortunate to work for them. But I'm telling you right now, from what I've heard of you talk about in other podcasts and what I've seen, just like scrolling through Instagram and trying to just understand you and like your last couple of years, like you do, it seems a phenomenal job of making sure that the company culture and the people are happy to be there, which I think, you know, as better than anybody else, is that just ripples into the work, which then ripples into the product, which then ripples into sales. And it's literally just a domino effect. So I'm curious, like, why was that so important to you? Because there's not every company treats it like that. Not every company is employee first and doing retreats and, flying the team out for a weekend to do these things because they just think it's expensive and we should be focusing on the work. And why is that so important to you?
Well, off the top, I just wanted to build a company that I wanted to work for. I'm going to be working here. So that was like the first thing. And then there's this concept that I think about a lot. When you look at like your body, right? I think a lot of people look at eating healthy as something that's maybe really expensive, where it's like, should I buy the organic, whatever it is, or should I go and get a hamburger and fries? The hamburger and fries is a lot cheaper, right? But in the long run, when you're looking at like medical bills, when you're looking at, reduced performance just from feeling like shit, performing low performance, the cost is actually probably a lot higher to eat poorly. Just when you look at, in the long term. And I try to draw that same parallel with business, where a lot of owners, they look at providing benefits towards their employees as something that's really, really expensive. We offer like access to a functional medicine doctor. Everybody gets an Oura ring. We have coaches. We really push people to go and take those trips that are going to bring back inspiration. Like we sponsor a remote working trip. Like people have gone to Patagonia and Costa Rica, all of these places just on their own, right? Going to work down there. And we do all this because yes, it's expensive and it is an experiment, but in the long run, when you look at employee retention, the cost of losing an employee is so high. In some cases, it's kind of like, it's like priceless. There's been studies that show that it's between like 1 to even like 2.5x the annual salary is the cost to replace someone. Wow. But, with certain people, it could be way more. And especially when you're working at a startup and then there's, 10, 20, 30 people that are all highly passionate and have all of that knowledge that they've built by working there. When they leave that company, you're creating this huge vacuum. And it's like finding a person that you trust that can eventually get all that knowledge back and then have all that passion. Losing a couple people at that stage of your company can be like catastrophic, probably. And so for me, I look at it the same way. It's like we're investing on the front end because the costs are actually a lot more affordable. Like this is the smartest way to spend our money, but you have to look at it in this longer term perspective in order to realize that. So that's what that's where we're putting our chips.
You're doing it right, man. And I think too, even when you guys had started, you were already fully remote. So I would imagine that once the pandemic shifts happen and most of the world is figuring out how do we make these changes, you guys are already good to go because this is already the system that's been built for the company.
Definitely. Yeah. We just allow people to work from wherever they thrive. We do have a lot of employees that live in LA. And we're building a new space here that's going to be sort of like a co-working space for us, but also for the community too. Wow. So any of our employees can fly in. Like I'll be working there most days of the week just because it's going to be amazing to work around our team. But nobody's required to be there at any time. It's just that most people probably will want to come in because we'll have a cafe, we'll have sauna, cold plunge, meditation rooms and whatnot, and fun community events. But yeah, having that being woven into our foundation made navigating the pandemic, like nothing changed. Like we already had the meeting structure, we already had the communication base. So it kind of makes you anti-fragile in a way.
Wow. When this place opens, if it's an open door policy, I might be popping in on a Friday afternoon and see what the scene is like. Cause, meditation and saunas, cold plunges, you sign me up, man. That's all, that's all speaking my language.
Mm-hmm, yeah. 2/3 of the space will be open to the public. Like it's going to be a full on cafe. co-working, no working space. Yeah.
So cool. That's so cool. Quick break from today's episode, and then we'll get right back to it. Today's episode is brought to you by the greatest hydration brand in all the land, Liquid I.V. This product has been a game changer in my life. It helps me feel hydrated on a daily basis. It helps me have a clear mind, be very creative. Honestly, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, I'm always doing something, trying to stay very balanced, but also always trying to make use of every minute of every day. And this product has been a game changer. Two of my favorite flavors I have, if you're visually watching today, is watermelon and the immune support, which is tangerine. Absolutely incredible. If you head over to liquidiv.com and use my promo code TheBeardedMan, all one word, that'll get you 25% off every single order. Once again, that's TheBeardedMan, all one word. It is an incredible product. When you push your body too hard, it's feeling run down. It is extremely important to stay hydrated. Making hydration a priority helps us feel better on a day-to-day basis. Just one stick of Liquid IV and 16 ounces of water hydrates you faster and more efficiently than water alone. We have so many different great flavors at Liquid IV that I think there's always a flavor for somebody. It contains 5 essential vitamins, B3, B5, B6, B12, and vitamin C, with 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks, made with premium ingredients, non-GMO, free of gluten, dairy, and soy. So it really does help anyone that, even if you have some dietary restrictions, I think this product can fit into your diet. And Liquid IV is on a mission to change the world. As of now, they've donated over 20 million servings across the globe. It's a lot of product. If you want to try it out, head over to liquidiv.com today. Use my promo code TheBeardedMan, all one word, 25% off every order. Your body's going to be thankful for it. The show is all about reaching your inner potential, and I really do believe that Liquid IV will help every single one of you fuel you on your day-to-day of reaching that inner potential. So check it out, liquidiv.com, TheBeardedMan. All one word, 25% off. Let's get back to today's episode. What are 2 to 3 skills that you've had to develop as a CEO and founder that help you operate at the level you operate?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's interesting because our company grew really fast, but our team grew kind of slower. Like for the first 2 years, there was only for the first year, it was 3 people, like myself, my co-founder, and 1 other person. We just leveraged contractors in a really amazing way. And then we started to grow, but we grew very slowly and consciously, really thinking through, what do we absolutely need? My co-founder and I always believed in really feeling the burn before we hired. I really wanted to understand the problem, the first principles problem, and almost understand the language behind it. So one example would be with Facebook advertising. Early on, I was running all of our ads, even though I didn't know how to, but I knew that if you hire an agency without having some sort of fluency around the metrics, how things are run, you could totally get worked over. And we did hire an agency early on before I fully knew about how Facebook ads worked. And there was all these conversations around yeah, well, you just need optimize CTRs, and we need this kind of creative asset, and and they're just kind of kicking the can down the road. And eventually I removed them, and I learned, Facebook ads essentially through YouTube. And then now when we're working with partners, bringing on people to our full-time team, I sort of know what's good and what's not to a certain level. And so that allowed us to build pretty slow, but now we're 22 people.
Wow.
And so over the last year, I've had to undergo a lot of personal growth. From a leadership perspective, because really for the first 2 years, I was CEO, but I was still very much a player in the game. I wasn't in full Phil Jackson mode. I was still on the court.
You're the executor still.
Yeah, I was doing a lot of the design and shooting a lot of the content, writing a lot of the copy, and designing the email flows and all of that. And I love doing that. It's really, really tough making this transition from being a player to a coach. I'd say that's probably the main skill that I'm learning is sitting in that coach role more often, and being an excellent communicator with why we're doing things, so that other people can sort of come to the how and to the what we're building on their own.
Yeah,
is a big one. So people management has been the biggest growth area for both myself and my co-founder. And then I would also say that time management is a big one. Being able to do a lot of different things within the company is a double-edged sword, because I'll see problems and I'll instantly go into like solution mode because I can solve it, or I have a good idea around how to solve it. And I have to figure out ways to unplug and disconnect. And for me, it's around just talking to people, like jumping on the phone with, our marketing manager or our VP of brand and just talking through the problem and letting them run with it versus me jumping in and typing up like a brief and going in and trying to solve it. Like it was really, it was starting to lead to burnout in a way. I think I was getting to that stage where I was just doing way too much. And so pulling away and managing my time has been a huge, like there's a learning curve there too, surprisingly. It's like,
I believe it.
Yeah, it's tough to do.
Yeah, especially when you go from I mean, we're talking only a few years ago, you were in the kitchen yourself, making these ingredients, putting things together and shipping out yourself, to now like having to trust and believe in the people that you hire to execute and do these things. Can't be an easy task, but obviously, as you know, that just allows you to scale and allows you to get into a place where your time is much more valued at thinking probably bigger picture, higher level versus the day-to-day decisions that, you now have team members that are able to choose on your behalf. And I can only imagine what that actually has to feel like. But kind of just like thinking back on those early stages of you in the kitchen, and, and this really what I love about your story is, like anything that really does well, is you were scratching your own itch. You were solving your own problem. And so, how did you determine like these ingredients to, I know this is definitely coming off inspired of the India trip. And I think you were having to do a lot of research and like, what are ingredients that can help me feel energized and alive, but not necessarily just directly caffeine. How did you land on like some of these ingredients that are used in MUD, but then also I know you guys were able to then come up with a rest one and a night routine one, which is obviously completely separate.
Yeah. So I came home from that trip. I ended up traveling a little bit more after India. I went to a couple of places and, came back pretty refreshed, but very clear on what I wanted to do. And I wanted to start another company, and within like 2 months of arriving,
right? This is number 3.
No, this is the second company.
Okay.
But I just wanted to, I didn't want to start a company necessarily. I wanted to be on the ground floor. Like I knew that that's where my sweet spot was in life. Like bringing something from zero and seeing where it could go, is where I feel like my skill sets are best utilized. And so I came home with kind of that intention out in the world and ended up joining a team within like 2 months after that was just perfect. It was a remote team working on a big like B2B SaaS problem that we don't need to go into. It's nothing related to what we're doing now. But oddly enough, the CEO of that company is now the COO of MUD. So he's my co-founder. The company didn't end up working out, but while we were launching it, I was like, okay, I got this job, well-paying, super passionate about what we're doing. And I started to look at my morning routine as like, how can I wake up every morning and prime my body, my mind towards pursuing this passion, but also I'm training jujitsu every day and doing CrossFit here and there, and launching this fine art career. Like, how do I, look at this mug as being something much more than just this vessel for a bunch of caffeine? I was like, if I'm going to drink this every day, it could probably address these other areas that I think would benefit me, like focus, like energy is for sure one, but what about like immune support? What about inflammation support? What about cardio, endurance, all of these things? I was like, I don't know if it can, but if it can, I definitely want that. And so I started to research different ingredients. I fell in love with chai when I was in India. I was drinking this, dissimilar to India, this chai that had no sugar and not a lot of cream and milk, and really low caffeine, feeling great, just kind of kicking caffeine out of my daily, or bringing my caffeine content down, made me feel amazing. And then I started to research these different mushrooms first. Each one seemed to be, based on what I was reading, they would bring about some sort of benefit that seemed to be really aligned with my lifestyle. So lion's mane was added for focus, cognitive function. Cordyceps was more the body side, the endurance, the cardio. Reishi and chaga was added for both stress management, but also for immune support. And then I added turmeric for inflammation. I was like constantly sore. I added cinnamon to help with sugar cravings. I was intermittent fasting, and I found that if I drink cinnamon, it kind of allowed me to navigate this first, like from waking up till 1 or 2 when I wanted to eat, with a lot more ease without like trying to run to the kitchen to grab something. And then added cacao to sort of round out that flavor profile. And I mean, I was just like mixing this up in a jar very similar to this. And, there was no like portion sizes or anything. I was just like, these ingredients are good for me and they're making me feel amazing. And it tastes good enough to build a morning ritual around. That was sort of it. Wow. And I was working on a different company, right? All my attention, my focus was in the tech space really. Mm-hmm. At that time, I was thinking about, this tech company that I was working on and building like some apps on the side for people, designing some apps. And I just thought this weird drink was just because I was dealt a bad set of cards and, I couldn't drink a high amount of caffeine like everyone else. They all seemed to be fine. But as the years progressed and more people, like I was bringing this drink with me to like Burning Man and stuff, like, and bring it to to office environments, co-working spaces, like gyms, and people would be like, what is that? And I'd walk them through what it was. But I think they're more interested in like why I was drinking that or why I wasn't drinking what they were drinking. And I was really surprised to find that most people that I talked to were like, oh my God, I'm trying to like wean off coffee, or like I'm trying to kick that afternoon cup or quit altogether, like for the same exact reasons that I had. And I was like, well, I'm really not alone here. Like most people drink coffee, but most people also want to reorient their relationship to it. But there wasn't really like the cultural narrative, there wasn't the information, there wasn't really the products out there that were positioned in a way to serve that community. And that was the big aha for me, where I was like, whoa, over the last 8 years, I've sort of developed this broad skill set that ranges from business, starting companies, to design, to front-end web development. And then created this drink too, which is kind of a skill, I guess, or like knowledge. And all of that was like, whoa, I could actually bring this to the world, and I could kind of just do it on my own. Like for the first time in my life, I didn't need a developer to like help me with this app idea. I didn't really need to get a bunch of people on board with me. I was just like, I'm going to put this online as like a test, an experiment, see what happens. And so, it was very much like lean startup mentality, just trying to get like an MVP out there and get to that next information event. And over the course of a weekend in May of 2018, I just like had the whole vision for the site, for the branding, for the packaging. There was no like whiteboarding of like, what should it be called? Or like, what is the new trend on like color schemes? I was just like, what would I want to say? Like, what do I currently call it? I was just calling it mud to my friends because it like looked like mud and it was kind of funny. And yeah, what should the website look like? It all just was there in my head, and I just made it really fast, put it online, started saying, I'm not mad at coffee, I'm just disappointed in our Instagram posts. And it just started to get traction, like drawing that line in the sand, for probably the first time, like made people who were questioning their coffee intake or questioning their caffeine intake, or maybe not even aware of it. All of a sudden now they're like, wait, how does that make me feel? All of a sudden this company, this brand, this product like spoke to them, and orders started to come in. And yeah, like you said, just down the street from where I'm at currently, I was like working full time, but then coming home on my lunch breaks to ship out orders, and coming home at night, like mixing it up in my kitchen and packaging it all up and just seeing where it went. Like that was the beginning. And just every step of the way, I was reaching out. I was doing the things that like lean startups recommend, where I was reaching out to every single customer. Like, how'd you find this? What do you think? What's going on? And started to build, like, do we have potential for product market fit here? And within 6 months we were doing, I don't know, like 6 figures a month in revenue. And like, it was just, there's something special here.
Man, it's beautiful to hear that. It's incredible to hear that it was really a true, just you creating something for yourself. And then looking back, it's very oftentimes that we're in a position that maybe we're not enjoying. It's not the career that we want to have, but you're able to pull on all these different experiences, all these different skills that you've had from your past, and then deploy it with this one opportunity for, what MUD was just an idea at the time. And now looking back on, it's like, yeah, of course I was going to pursue this and it's this massive business now. But at the time, it's still, it's such a big part of reaching our inner potential is giving ourselves that permission to just follow the interest, to just follow the idea. You never know where something's going to take you. And the only way you're ever going to find out, it sounds so cliche, the only way you're ever going to find out is by actually pursuing the thing, right? It sounds cliche, looking back on it or saying it today, but it's so true. And it's great. You're a great example of like, you had that internal interest, you had this idea, you weren't guaranteed or told the blueprint of where or what this was going to become, but you followed it. And when you followed it, it's became what it is today. And I think it's just incredible, man. And props to you for having that internal ability to just give yourself the ability to try it and trust yourself that if it's meant to be, something will come from it.
Yeah, that was exactly the stance I took. Like some people asked, like, was it scary or like you're taking a big risk here? I was like, not really. Like there was some financial risk. Like I didn't have money at the time to invest in it. I did open like a credit card and was racking up some debt there, but not a lot. And like I was kind of buying inventory for orders as they came. So there wasn't really a risk there on that front. And then on a personal level, it was like, what if I'm still going to drink this drink either way. I've literally made this position this company as just what I'm drinking, what I'm doing. And if people don't want it, who cares? Like, yeah, I'm just going to continue
more inventory for me. I'll just stock this in the back.
There was no risk. And so, yeah, I would challenge people to really like consider like what the risks actually are. If you're like right on that edge of starting something or dipping in and taking a leap, like really, what is it? Like, what is the risk? Like, what is the worst thing that can happen?
Boom. What is the worst case scenario? Because that perspective is going to allow you to just say, screw it. I don't have anything to lose. Or sometimes we create these con items of starting the thing and like, well, we might lose money. It might not work out. I might waste my time. Well, what if it worked out? What if I learned something? What if it opened a door? So just instead of gravitating towards our mind of the reasons of why we shouldn't, look towards why we should and what could potentially come from it. And I think that just allows you to roll the dice, say screw it, and let's actually go for it.
And also, a good way to mitigate risk as well is to just put some version of it out there. I think for me, one of my skill sets is being comfortable with discomfort. And as a creative, like being comfortable with imperfection. And putting something out there, knowing that like this is, the end result where I want it to be. Like I want it to be so much better, but I'm putting it out there right now because the best result is ultimately going to come through consumer feedback. Yeah. It's not just going to be me sitting here for a year designing what the product should be. It's actually like putting it out there, and over the course of that year, having like 12 iterative loops. And then the end result is going to be way better than if you just try to design it in a silo and make it perfect and safe. And so that can alleviate a lot of risk because you could just put an Instagram post up and put like a pre-sale and to see what happens, whatever idea you have. And you kind of get this information event of like, is there interest? Why are they interested? And just kind of go step by step building from there.
Yeah. One thing I know to be true about whether you're starting a business, following a passion, working on yourself on any bucket of your life, it's always a work in progress. So don't assume that it's going to be 100% when you start, but know that you're going to get a little bit better every single day. And so as long as you're taking those strides, it's going to compound in time. Shane, we're getting to the final 5. These are the last 5 questions, just 1 sentence answer if possible. If you got to go a little bit longer, fine. But we just try to keep them to 1 sentence if possible. Question number 1. How can people learn to give themselves permission to follow their interests and ideas?
Just do it, I guess. Just go for it. I'd say podcasts can be a great vehicle. Whatever you're interested in, there's probably a podcast around it and a community that can support you pursuing it. It's
great. Question number 2. If you could go back and tell yourself one piece of advice at any point of your life, what would it be and when?
Breathe. Breath work has been an amazing tool for me that I've found over the last 2 years. I think if I knew about it earlier on, it could have probably mitigated a lot of unnecessary stress.
Yeah, it's so good. It's so important. I remind my roommate all the time, we're just like, yo, just breathe. It feels great. Question number 3. What's an area of your life you need to put more effort into?
Art. I want to be painting more. I want to be creating more. As the business has grown, I've had to take much more of like an administrative role, an organizational role, and hopefully that'll be shifting a little bit in the future as we bring some key members onto the team, and I'll be creating a lot more often.
Love to see it. I'm going to hold you accountable. I'm going to be looking for more of those posts, so make sure you're doing it. Question number 4. What is the first step anyone can take to reaching their inner potential?
Exploring what drives them, exploring who you are, which probably the first step to doing that could be making space for the voice to come through. I think that below our intellect, below our intuition, below what culture tells you, your friends are saying, lies a deeper intelligence, that tells your heart to beat, your lungs to breathe, the plants to grow, all of those things. And that you have to make room for that to come in. And oftentimes it's less is more, like do less, be quiet, like speak less, and even eating less can make room. But I think that's where it starts, tapping into your inner voice. And then from there, things seem to fall into place.
So true. 5th and final question for you. Somebody's listened to the last 53 minutes of this podcast. They finished listening to this episode. What is one challenge you have for the listener today after they wrap up listening to the podcast?
Think about that thing that, you've heard in passing and you're like, oh, I'm interested in that. But maybe you felt held back by your friend circle, what your parents might think, whatever it might be. Go and Google that. Go and find a podcast. Go find somebody passionately talking about it. Maybe look in your community for a meetup or a class that's going on, and just show up, just drop in, just see what happens. Follow that little inner calling with curiosity and see where it leads you.
Yeah, I love it. A lot of doors will open by just actually giving yourself that green light to actually go for it. Shane, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today, man. Was really excited to chat with you today just based on a lot of the research that I did. I could tell you were very much on your path of like, this is what you should be doing. And it's incredible to see that you've been able to create a product that not only benefited you and your own needs, but then you've been able to ripple it into at this point in time, I would imagine tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of subscribers on top of all the customers that are buying it. And just thank you for opening up too. We definitely dove into some very personal topics that I don't take lightly for you being able to just willingly share with me today. So just keep crushing it, man. Stoked to connect with you, and definitely will be keeping my eyes peeled as I'm moving about Venice now that I know your face. And really, like, at the end of the day, people's time is precious. And so thank you sincerely for carving out time to be on the show today, man.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really liked the trajectory we took. It was different than other podcasts I've been on. So I appreciate that. I
will say, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to learn more about the business and how Shane built it, there's plenty of podcasts out there, but I definitely try to focus on the individual in these conversations while also incorporating a little bit of the business. But know that there are plenty of great podcasts out there that Shane talks about in depth of how they built the business. If you, ladies and gentlemen, have enjoyed today's episode, please screenshot this episode on whatever platform you're listening in on, post it to your IG story, tag Shane. He is at So Many Possibilities on IG, and tag me at Bobbbaaaay. That's B-O, 3 B's, 4 A's and a Y. Share the podcast in your IG story. Let us know, what was the biggest takeaway? How did this episode change your perspective? Is there anything new that you're going to try because of this conversation, or just anything at all? What did you learn through this podcast? Also linked up in the description below, I will have Mudwater's website. Please go check out the product. I have a bunch of it in my kitchen here. I've been thankful that they sent me a massive care package, so please give it a try. It's phenomenal. I personally like adding a little bit of almond milk, but hey, you know what? You got to try your own adventure and mix up some things. They are just on Instagram. They're at Drink Mud Water. That's DRINKMUDWTR. And then their website is mudwtr.com. Once again, that's mudwater.com. It will be linked up in the description below. Anywhere else I should be sending people after the episode?
No, that's great.
Love it. Shane, thanks for being on the podcast. It's been a pleasure talking, man.
Thanks, man.
Ladies and gentlemen, It's the Bearded Man Podcast. See ya.